Authenticity. That is the problem. Instead of talking for 20 minutes and making you wait, theoretically wondering what is the issue with all of these Meghan Markle pursuits, I'm just going to tell you off the bat, I think it's authenticity. My name's Erin. I'm a licensed therapist and I love analyzing all things pop culture. Today, we're going to be talking Meghan Markle as a whole, and through researching for this video, honestly, my opinion of her has changed a little bit, and my bias coming into this was pretty little, actually. I felt pretty neutral about her. I didn't really have a strong opinion one way or the other, but through this, I've kind of realized she does not strike me as the most authentic person. Meghan Markle has always been a polarizing figure, and her new show, Love Meghan, has only further pushed the controversy. Today we're going to analyze the patterns of inauthenticity that Meghan has displayed throughout her entire career, and specifically really land on how her newest business ventures, Love Meghan, the TV show, and as ever, her new rebrand, just have further instilled this idea of inauthenticity. And ultimately, I do think the question can be asked, is this a deeper therapeutic issue of inauthenticity, or is this ultimately just a giant marketing ploy? And either way, what do both of those tell us? Over the years, we can definitely track Meghan Markle's public persona, from ambitious actress on Suits to a fairy tale princess in the royal family to a humanitarian and advocate, and now to a social influencer on her new show. But the issue isn't her reinvention. Many celebrities reinvent themselves over time, and that's just a natural process of life, is defining your personality and building your identity out. So that's all good and fine. The problem is that when there's consistent displays of inconsistency. Meghan has repeatedly framed herself as a quote-unquote private person. But this feels so contradicted with the amount of in-depth interviews, documentaries, and now a reality-like TV show that she's a part of. Also, her entire documentaries on Netflix that are pretty invasive into her life, I would say. I haven't seen them but in fullness, but I would say those probably also constitute going more into her life than I would expect for someone that says that they're really private. And then from a psychological standpoint, when you have somebody who's claiming one thing and then acting out the opposite, it's either because they have an intense lack of self-awareness that their values are not aligning with their actions, or more simply, it's because they're trying to curate an image of themselves and control their image in other people's eyes. And something that's really telling when it comes to authenticity is the way individuals communicate. And as I've watched Meghan and all of her documentaries, all of her interviews, she really is a person that comes across as performative in the sense that she has rehearsed speech and performative facial expressions. And I also think there's a layer of what's called pseudo-profundity, which is saying something that sounds very deep but actually has no meaning to it at all. And it's this dissonance that makes people feel like something is off, but they just can't pinpoint what it is. And I am willing to acknowledge Meghan comes from a culture of curation. When you marry into the royal family, image is everything. You are picked apart by the public to the 10th degree. And I do think it's unfair. And I do think that there have been statements about Meghan that are unfair. I think a lot of her hatred is probably unfair. And also, I think what people are really alluding to or frustrated by is just that she has always lived in curation. It does not feel like we have ever gotten an authentic version of Meghan. When someone constantly manages their image for different audiences, and this is common in a lot of celebrities because they have to do that, you get what's called ego depletion. And ego depletion is really just a form of emotional burnout because you're trying to maintain a persona that doesn't feel real or isn't real to you. And over time, this can cause a lot of inner conflict, inner turmoil, anxiety, even paranoia about being found out, that someone might see the real version of you. I think Shawn Mendes is actually, this is just coming to mind now, this is a really good example of that because Shawn Mendes, I think he was raised, normal household, got famous off of YouTube, and then all of a sudden was shoved into the limelight. And so I think the feeling of having to always be on and always curate himself and always present himself really caused some mental exhaustion and deep anxiety that caused him enough to have to not tour anymore. But I bring up ego depletion because I wonder if some of the time that Meghan has potentially painted herself as a victim, because I do think that what she has been through is valid, and I do think there are some very authentic struggles in the midst of everything that's come out. And also, I do think it's entirely possible that she has painted herself as a victim and leaned into that narrative, which is confusing because she also leans into a narrative pretty frequently of being a very strong, capable individual. And I would so rather her just say, like, I am exhausted. I have had a very hard time putting on this face for many years because of the royal family or because of always being in the spotlight, because she was in Suits and you're in Hollywood, and when you're in Hollywood you're in the spotlight, and then all of a sudden you're dating a prince. I mean, that's insane. So like, I would so rather her, instead of leaning into this narrative of like victimhood and trying to be like, but I'm so strong, like, just tell me that you're tired. Now, I want to talk even more about Love Meghan itself. The show is meant to be a stripped back, intimate look at Meghan's real life, but it's highly produced and selectively curated. Notice how everything is polished, from the lighting to the settings to the dialogue.
So funny too that you keep saying Meghan Markle. You know I'm Sussex now.
Authenticity is not about perfection, it's about relatability. And Love Meghan really displays more of a lifestyle ad than an unfiltered look at a very real person. And that's so disappointing because she had something so special and she could do something so unique with this show. I mean, she got a huge contract from Netflix to do the show. Netflix really likes Harry and Meghan. That being said, like, this could have been a really fun dive into more of who she is and more of her raw personality, but it just feels so scripted. Rachel Ray is such a good juxtaposition of this because people were obsessed with her cooking show, and she has her own cooking line and she's famous, all those things. She had this ability to have this very inviting nature to her communication, to her interviews, all of those things. And then when you watched her cook, she ad-libbed, she went off the recipe card, which I think is even more authentic than you can say for Meghan's portrayal of cooking. Not to mention that Meghan's recipes are not anything that really scream heartfelt or connected. Much like Magnolia or Chip and Joanna Gaines, so much of her cookbooks and how she portrays herself is super connected to her family and her memories. So that there is a piece, even though she's really curated too, there is a piece of like, okay, I can see that there is some realness in this and where this comes from. I mean, the first scene of the first episode is Meghan saying that she's going to make bath salts for her friend that she's hosting. So she shows us all how to make bath salts, which I was like, that is so disconnected from a day-to-day person. Your day-to-day person who's hosting somebody typically does not have the brain space to think about making them a special bath salt concoction. They're worried about having a clean place to sleep and making sure that their guests are fed well, typically. And if you have the time to go get all of those specific ingredients and think to the 10th degree of hosting that person that way, that's wonderful and amazing. However, it's just so disconnected from what a normal day-to-day person has the capacity to do. And I don't want to knock where this show is coming from because Meghan speaks to re-identifying values and things in her life that she's passionate about and cares about after motherhood. And I think any mom could resonate with that. So that's not what I'm trying to point out. What I'm trying to point out is that I love the idea of that. However, I feel like it was missed. You're on set of like the most curated show that looks very perfectionistic. Everything's in line. My kitchen is a complete disaster when I am cooking. And I cook and I clean as I go. So like, even with that, this curated sense of perfectionism does not align with that statement at all. Okay, let's talk lastly, Meghan Markle's new business venture, which is a rebrand of her last product line. Her last product line was labeled as American Riviera Orchard, which is a mouthful in and of itself to say and very confusing in its meaning. And I looked it up, and I appreciate the heartfelt thought behind why she named it this, but it was a connectedness to her town or neighborhood, not really sure which, of Santa Barbara. While I appreciate that sentiment, no one knows what that means. It's very unclear what your brand offers, does. And also, I love the idea that she's connected to her home life. However, the average home price in Santa Barbara is somewhere between 1.5 million, 1.7 million, somewhere in that range. And so even that just feels like a disconnect from the day-to-day person. And it just feels inauthentic to pick a name that is associated with such a highly wealthy area in the US. And I think there's so many different ways that she could have gone about her passion for or values for her home life, growing up in California and really appreciating that place, because so many people love California. They can get behind that. So I just think there would have been some different ways to navigate that. I digress. She has now rebranded, which was probably a good choice to rebrand. However, don't know if I love her rebrand, to As Ever, which leaves me equally confused and equally wondering what does that mean and what is going on. As Ever, I think, is her movement towards trying to be more authentic. However, the products that she's offering just feel so out of touch and so inauthentic. They feel very of the aesthetic, effortlessly luxurious. For example, one of the products she's offering is raspberry preserves in keepsake packaging. That is literally so out of touch with everybody's movement towards sustainability and reducing packaging and all of these things. And it again just underscores that I don't think she has a good pulse on the day-to-day person. And that to me just feels, I think not having that touch or understanding really where people are actually at in life feels inauthentic to me. And maybe that's just a personal opinion. But when you go to the As Ever page and you're asking, okay, Meghan, what is As Ever about? This is what it says. As ever means as it's always been, or some even say in the same way as always. If you've followed along since my days of creating the TIG, you'll know this couldn't be truer for me, she continued. This new chapter is an extension of what has always been my love, beautifully weaving together everything I cherish: food, gardening, entertaining, thoughtful living, and finding joy in the everyday. That, again, is just so much pseudo-profundity. It literally just screams to me a whole lot of words with not a whole lot of meaning. I don't think she knows what this brand is. And I need to go into actual rebranding her name. So she tried to get the As Ever trademark. They rejected her trademark because it was too close to a Chinese clothing brand. So in order to counteract that, she just decided to take clothing line completely out of her trademark patent or proposition, which to me says, do you even know who your company is that you could just so easily take something as big as a clothing line out of the potential for what you want to be for your future products? It either says you believe so strongly in the name As Ever that you're willing to cut things to keep the name, or you just don't have actually a good grasp on who you are and what your company or product line is supposed to produce. And I didn't even mention the TIG, and I don't really need to go into it, but long story short, the TIG was her very first soiree into the lifestyle blogging world, and it was a very popular blog, but even that was so specifically intentionally curated, and even had blog posts that were talking about who she sits next to at dinner parties, but she's friends with rich aristocrats and very famous people, and that is just so tone deaf and out of touch. It's that's not who I'm sitting next to at dinner. So I think even then it was just a disconnect from the day-to-day reality of the people. And I think she's tried for so long to present herself as a day-to-day person, but she's been I think, pushed into the spotlight for so long, whether that be Suits or the royal family, or, oh, I didn't even talk about Spotify, which maybe I should go into. I'll do a quick dive into Spotify. That's a whole nother thing that I was just like, what? So Spotify, she had a deal with Spotify, $20 million deal. Her and Harry did to make a podcast. I think it was a 3-year deal. Spotify cut the deal because within 3 years of having that deal, she had only made 12 episodes of her podcast. Isn't that 3 years? So 4, 8, 12. So 4 episodes a year, which is not even in line with what their contract wanted. But people who worked at Spotify, specifically the owner of Spotify, the president of Spotify, had a lot of negative things to say about working with them. It just became clear that like the podcast wasn't a priority for her. She, and Harry too, I mean, he was a part of it too, but she had done her own version where she was interviewing strong women in the industries, different industries. And so she had her idea for the podcast. Harry didn't have his, but it ultimately showed that like they weren't really invested in that idea. And again, I think what this all shows is that they don't fully know who they are, or more specifically, Meghan doesn't know who she is. I think sometimes a place of inauthenticity can come from a place of not truly knowing yourself. And there's been so many things that she's done, the TIG, her business pursuits, the Spotify podcast, that show like she's trying to push out this image of herself, but there's always just something off about it. And I can have compassion for this, and I understand that like the life that she's lived is really unique. And I don't know how many opportunities she's truly been given to know herself authentically or authentically express herself because of the intensity of the royal family or being in Hollywood, all of those things. I know that's real and at play here. And therapeutically, this is all to say, like, I hope that if this is true and she doesn't know herself and this isn't an authentic portrayal of herself, that she can make time and space to get to know herself well. And again, I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know what she's feeling day to day. This might be in her world the most authentic display of herself. And so I can't sit here and say for sure with truth that it is not. From my perspective, my feelings about it, I don't think it is. I think the ultimate underscoring of this is just, does Meghan know herself? How authentic is she really? And how much of this is all to promote her business? If you've ever felt like you just couldn't quite place why you don't like her or has felt off for years, I hope that this idea of her authenticity resonates with you and helps you get to a point of understanding of like, oh, that's what it's been for so long. I think the other big takeaway from this is the recognition that celebrities are going to curate their image. They are going to create and portray a person that people will like or want to invest in or will fund for whatever reason. And so we have to be really careful as day-to-day people of who we're following and why we're following them. And also who we're trying to imitate, because we might just be trying to imitate an extremely inauthentic version of somebody. So what do you think? Do you think Meghan Markle is inauthentic? Do you think that this is all for media? Do you think she is truly authentic? Let me know in the comments. I know she's a very polarized figure, so I'd love to hear from you guys what you actually think. Any support on my videos is so appreciated. A like, a sub, a comment, whatever that is, I am so grateful. And I am really excited to keep growing my channel. Thanks for coming along, and I will see you all soon.